So as you can see, we have a wide range of opinions, and part of the reason for that is because, in fact, this session was perfectly titled, which is Campus at a Crossroads. I think that what's fairly clear is that I'm sure many, if not every single one of you, has come into this session with ideas about what you imagine the challenges on campus are if you're not actually on a campus, because there are people here who look like they might actually be on campuses currently. But I wonder whether or not the most recent years have actually experienced, based on what I've been hearing up here, whether there have been some distinct changes. And I was very struck particularly by Mark's phrase of creative alienation, and I wonder whether or not I could actually ask him to talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, the way that I'd like to frame today's conversation is, I think that there are up here, I think that there are representatives of ideas and specifically one program, but many programs that are were accepted and are accepted and have proven successes. The challenge, though, is that even with those proven successes and accepted ideas, I think that what Andy and Rachel show is that there are communities and individuals whose questions are not being met still. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like for us to talk a little bit up here about the changes that I think are literally taking place as we're sitting here. And so, Mark and Natan, if I could ask you to talk about what you see as the recent history and the changes that you think have happened on campuses, and the changes that you think have happened not just around the conversation around Israel, but the broader conversation that young Jews are having about their Jewish identity as a whole.
Well, that's hard because they don't invite me. I'm an old guy, and my perception is that the knowledge, and maybe it's birthright, maybe it's Natan's activities, and those many others, that the understanding and sort of, if you will, allegiance to Israel is growing stronger. I also think that the Jewish students, this could be good or bad, have gotten more political, and they worry. A lot of times you have 10,000 students eligible to vote, and 400 of them show up for an election, and then you get some election results that a lot of us might find bothersome. So I've seen more organization of Jewish students on campuses. A sort of willingness to engage in the internal political process of the campus. I've seen a lot of creativity on campus. We have something called, I think it's called the Olive Tree Initiative. It's been controversial in some circles, not in my circle. And they try to get Muslim and Jewish students to come to Israel and meet with Israeli leaders and some Arab leaders and so forth. But what's happening, maybe it's the age of Facebook and social media, everything seems to go viral these days. So we had a terrible incident a number of years ago at the Irvine campus. Ambassador Oren is shouted down. I wrote a letter of apology, and then disciplinary action was taken. Indeed, the local DA got into the matter and all that. But it just went worldwide. And then I guess some Jewish people are less attentive to their email than others. But years later, I still get ripples of people objecting to what happened there. So all that is happening, and the thing I fear the most, and I'll shut up about this, is the outside Jewish organizations take it very seriously, and that can lead to a very combative situation on campus where sometimes I think, just let the kids handle it. They're really smart. They know what they're doing. Just let them deal with it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't provide resources or you shouldn't help out if asked, but they really are, they are a pride. They're very intelligent. They're not easily snowed, and so you help them, but let them handle it.
Well, if I think what changed, let's say in comparison with what was 10 years ago and today, it looks, at first glance, it looks much less than like a battlefield, because then it was a real battlefield. There were very violent demonstrations. In Rutgers University, which was mentioned already today, 20 years ago, but 10 years ago, I got the pie in the face with the shouts, "Freedom to Palestine," from the Jew who was the head of the group, Freedom for Palestine. This group still exists, but nobody there will be acting so violently because it doesn't work. In fact, that was my best appearance. All the university was with me after this. In fact, I'd like very much today when I travel to the university that somebody will throw a pie in my face, because that's a really easy way to mobilize sympathy. But nobody's interested, maybe because of internet, maybe because they are more afraid, because I have to say that the Jewish organization in these 10 years did a lot of work. The AIPAC, Karen for Democracy, Stand With Us, David Project, and of course the fact that there is critical mass of young Jews who visited Israel, who are connected, and our program on coordinating all these programs through Israeli fellows, it definitely creates different atmosphere. Now, having said all this, I have to say in the last few months, we lost one after another on many major campuses this vote for resolution of boycotting Israel. Year after year, we were winning. Sometimes we were winning with one vote, as the student said it. But when you're losing with one vote, still you feel it's very painful. And when I look into it, I find out that simply local Jewish organizations, including our activists, say that simply doesn't influence on anything. We are spending a lot of energy of working on this, preventing these resolutions, instead of positive work. And now we better want to concentrate on positive work. Look, here was this anti-apartheid week, and there were 50 students who went vote. And then we have our pro-Israeli event, and 500 students went vote. That's much more on the resolutions. I can't say, I don't think we still already have enough research, enough study to understand whether it is right or wrong. But no doubt that the struggle today is very different. And the other change is, of course, that it's not black and white. And this phenomenon of J Street, and many students are involved in it. And then our instruction to our Israeli fellows is, we are not the government of Israel. Government of Israel can afford sometimes to boycott J Street. We can't boycott. You have to be everywhere where students are and to work with them and to make sure that whatever their political views are, they are very comfortable with feeling themselves part of the family and connected to Israel. Because, and by the way, today it's more clear than 10 years ago, if you are not part of the ultra-Orthodox world, there is no future for you as a Jew if Israel is not a very important part of your identity. And that's something which I think is now much better understood than before.
Along the same lines, Gidi, you know, Taglit is such a widely publicized success, and the numbers that you mentioned speak for themselves. But I do wonder now if, now that the program is mature, if there's any sense of the politics that it's having kids come back to campus with, and whether or not those politics actually, the ones who actually are on campuses, or even people in their 20s, whether they're coming back with politics that they can then integrate into their lives.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that if you ask Israelis the same age about politics in the United States, I'm not sure that they know much more than the so-called ignorant American Jews. So they know, in average, something which is very minimal, and I think that the first tool that we have at our hands is really to expose them to more information, be it through a visit or through friends that they have in Israel or Israelis who come to the campus. So first of all, I'd like to say that since in the last 10 years, we see more and more the phenomenon that I think was described by Professor Steve Cohen. It's called the birthright bomb, that more young Jews at the age of the 2030s are closer to Israel, feel closer to Israel than 40 and 50s. And this is something that was generated by the numbers, as Natan says, the critical mass. So people have much more information. We know that they feel much more comfortable to speak about Israel, even though I can tell you that after 20-something years that I used to work on public affairs, etc., I didn't always know everything that needed to be said. So this is something that is ongoing issue that needs to be nurtured all the time, but at least after people come back from Israel, they feel much more equipped of talking about Israel, certainly to those who blame Israel for things that never happened. So this is something which is important. We see it also, by the way, today. There are about 2,500 to 3,000 Facebook groups. And each Facebook group, which are the groups of Birthright Israel, we always have somewhere around 8 Israelis. And we saw it, even if we did not try to do it, it happened by itself that during all the flotilla crisis and other small wars or wars that Israel had since the establishment of Taglit Birthright Israel, the Israeli peers used to be the first source of information to their overseas friends, and that was very, very important. Now, as for the political views, what we learn is that people feel much more engaged and closer to Israel than before, but very few, if at all, change their political views, which is good.
Now I have a question for both of you about many of these programs, Birthright, but also many of the programs you mentioned on campus. I have a friend who sometimes talks about all those programs as essentially entitlement programs. They're like food stamps or Medicare. And as a lot of American Jews will tell you, entitlement programs are a foundation of liberal Western democracy. But the question is, if you extend the metaphor, will these young Jews ever learn how to feed themselves? Like, if you are paying them, if you're giving them these engagements and interactions on campuses for free, is there any sense of how, not just a sense of connection, but any sense that in their 30s, that they are actually going to invest back in Jewish communities and actually become activists, for example, or become members of the Jewish community?
In order you get something, you have first to invest. So Birthright is a great first investment where you make this kind of injection and you brainwashing them for 10 days.
Never.
We have very powerful way of brainwashing. We simply put these names of our cities and towns, which immediately remind them that they're in the Bible land. We take them to their roots. Well, you take them to their roots, and you don't have to say too much. You recognize that you are an ancient nation. You put them meetings with all these people, soldiers and scientists, and it's such an exciting society. So reality is making all this brainwashing. We don't have to deal with this. But after this, no more free trips. After this first investment, every project that I mentioned, it means that you're given opportunity to show yourself, to display, whether it is AIPAC who is coming you and trying to involve you in political activity, whether it is David Project who is teaching you how to talk to different types of people, to convince them, whether it is Stand With Us, which gives you opportunities for activism, which you have to show. And of course, we can give different types of seminars about activism, we can do informational things. In the end, it is everybody, if they felt themselves inspired and connected to be part of Jewish people, oh wow, it's cool to be part of Jewish people. And that's the main conclusion of the first Israel experience, which then has to be developed. If you take our Masa programs in which they have to invest a lot. So of course, I would say it was great, and I was fully for this. I was from the first days of Taglit, before it was born, when there was still pregnancy and a lot of debate in the government whether we should support or not. But from those days, the founders were very insistent that it has to be a free trip, and I think it was not a mistake. It was very good. But it will be a big mistake if we'll continue giving free trips or free rides or whatever, this paternalistic approach for any other program. That's my opinion.
So first of all, our participants are too smart and intelligent to be brainwashed. We are not smart enough to try to brainwash them. Anyway,
Reality is doing it. Reality.
but I believe that you see the outcome. All the programs today in the Jewish world have huge input of our alumni. By the way, you talked about pregnancy. One of our alumni is sitting there, Michelle. She's about to give birth to, she was on Birthright, and now she's one of
Oh
the
God,
Jewish
this
leaders.
poor woman.
She has the right
She's
to
now,
give birth.
where are you? Stand up. So
Oh, no,
see,
באמת.
you see her? So,
Everybody wish Michelle
right-
So we-
B'Shah
For
Really?
giving birth, yeah.
B'Shah Tova, yeah. So Michelle is going to give birth to a baby whose father is going to be a person that she met on Birthright Israel. So we are very heavily invested and wish you B'Shah Tova tomorrow, whenever. So Michelle is only one of thousands. I believe that the majority of the graduates' age of Masa are alumni of Birthright. They pay money for that. I believe that the majority of Hillel students in the United States and other leaders of Jewish organizations around the world are alumni of Birthright. This is today the main way to bring people who distance themselves from the Jewish world, from Israel, to become the role players, the main role players in Jewish life now and in the years to come.
I think that yes, feel free to clap. I think that the one thing though that does seem clear to me is that whatever is happening on American campuses is incredibly vibrant. Whether there are parts of it that are problematic for some people or not, there's a lot of energy and a lot of resources being put into it. And I would like us to take an eye and look toward what's going on in Europe. And Andy, I'd like for you to talk a little bit. You talked in your remarks about all of the how alive Jewish student life is in Europe. What I'd like you to talk about are what are your challenges as they exist inside of a global Jewish community? So you are now sitting with a group of people and a panel of people who can hear what are your challenges? What do you need? Or how would you like to be part of the global conversation in ways that you feel you're not? Could you just speak a little bit to that? Because I feel like, my grandmother was from Macedonia, and she told me everybody left. Now I find out there are 200 young Jews in Macedonia. So there have to be ways for European Jews, maybe even driven by those students, to take a bigger part of the global Jewish conversation.
So I will start with how to involve Europe, I feel many times I get to all these conferences and international gatherings, and usually I'm the very only one from Hungary and the very few among Europe. There are a few French, British, and that's where the story ends. And I'm usually asked the question, so when are you making Aliyah? When are you going to leave Europe? Like Europe there's no Judaism left. It's only anti-Semites, and the Hezbollah took, and the Taliban, and everyone took over everything. And there are parts of it. Yes, of course, Europe is not easy. Europe's never really been easy, but I think that first of all, it's very important. But this is our fight, and this cannot come from abroad. To strengthen this European identity, to know, like, first of all, the European Union is something that it's very good for the Jews, because it all enforces or enables multinationalism, the fact that Europe is strong together, that the nationalistic views, which are all fearing so much, should be less and less, and more has to be a global European thinking. So, to come back to your question, I think that the most important thing what the European Jewish youth need is that they get the platform to act and to actually get back those. And I'm now talking about more of Central Eastern Europe, which represents a huge part of the picture, to get back those, let's say, 40 years where this generational gap. And I think it started to happen already, and this is mainly thanks to all those organizations like the Jewish Distribution Committee, who came to Central Eastern Europe and who established all this Jewish infrastructure, which led this community reestablish itself. But I think what we need is a platform and possibilities to speak up.
Yes, clap. Rachel, you seem like a pretty perfect example of creative alienation, right? I'm going to challenge you here. Perhaps your alienation from the community at Cornell was what enabled you to have the intellectual experience that you had. But there's a problem, which is that part of the way that you've solved the challenges is by devoting your life, personally and professionally, to Jewish life and Jewish thought. That seems unrealistic for the mass of American Jews. So my question to you and my challenge to you, because I actually would posit, just from my own observation, that many American Jews who don't have your background actually feel a lot of what you feel. They feel alienated without understanding quite why, and they feel alienated Jewishly, even more perhaps than on the Israel front. But that Jewish alienation prevents them from being able to engage in the campus's wider conversation about Israel. But my question to you is, what should everybody else do? Because not everybody else can become a Masonic, unfortunately. And so if you had to now create some idea for steps that could be taken for people who might have experienced the same challenges as you, what would they be?
Well, I think the way that I spoke a lot more in my speech about Jewish identity as opposed to Israel. And I think that that's something that's reflective of where a student is when they get to the college campus at 18. I was a small fish in a big pond. I came from a small community. And I think that a lot of young Jews also come from smaller communities. And when they get to the huge university environment, they want to feel a part of a community again. They want to feel a part of a tribe. And I think that that's where fostering a Jewish identity as opposed to a strong stance on Israel in particular, which is a very divisive and touchy and sensitive issue, is really important. And I think that that's somewhere where we could invest more resources instead of focusing so much on Israel on campus, maybe just talk about Judaism on campus, because I think that people feel their Jewish identities at a lot of different points in their life, but I think that on the college campus is a really important place to tap into that. I also think that in a lot of institutionalized Jewish programs or programs surrounding Israel, in some ways we have a lot of breadth, but not so much depth, right? So I think that it's amazing how many Jews have come to Israel on birthright trips. But I also think that there's a really strong core of future Jewish leaders, of people who will be sitting in the seats to my left in the future who already feel committed but don't feel like they can express that commitment through a program. And I think Masa is another great way that young Jews can come to Israel. But again, my program is one that's explicitly dedicated to politics, and we're 25 participants. And I think that there are more than 25 young Jews around the global Jewish community that want to learn about the politics of Israel and want to dive into the messy complexity that is. So I think that that's kind of where we need to work in terms of institutionalized Jewish life and programs directed towards Israel.
Yeah. I have to stop my questions because I'm being almost harassed by audience members that want to ask questions. So I don't know if there is a mic. I think yes, there is. I'm sorry. Thank you. So if you could just go around and just hand the mic off to right there. Yeah.
Hi. Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Hila, and I just came back from Philadelphia yesterday. I was an Israel Fellow, Jewish Agency Israel Fellow at Temple University for 2 years. And by my side, I have two other Israel fellows, Amir from Yale and Naveh from Penn, that she also wants to ask a question, and we fought over the mic. But I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for doing this. This is an amazing panel and very relevant to us. And I wanted to ask Gidi a question and have some remarks. If I
By the
may.
way, I always say that you know that you're at a Jewish event when the first person raises their hand and said, I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Yes, exactly. So I just want to say that regarding Birthright, I was a soldier on Birthright, and I also staffed 3 Birthright trips. And we had 4 Birthright trips from Temple University, and it's an amazing program. Having said that, I wanted to show a few challenges that I experienced as an Israel Fellow. And one of them is the fact that I find it a bit challenging that a lot of students are coming and they've never been to Israel before. And because Birthright is very restricting with who they accept and what are the conditions, a lot of people say, well, Birthright, A, it's free, B, it's trendy, so I really want to go. And at the age of 18, to be exposed to Israel for the first time is a bit problematic. And also the tools, advocacy tools, educational tools that they receive on the trip are not sufficient enough on campus. And a lot of students are facing challenges expressing what is Israel to them and how, like the politics of it. That is one thing. The second thing that I find a little bit challenging is the fact that orientations are not always allowed. And I see that my job as an Israel Fellow is to enhance Jewish identity through Israel. And it's something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Birthright, I think, is the middle. And it's important to have some sort of a follow-up program and something that is, meeting the expectations of students.
Okay, we just want to get to other people's questions.
Sorry. And
No,
so
no,
for
like that meant stop.
and only for a question, I feel that the mifgash, the encounter of the soldiers and the Israelis, of the Americans, is so important. How can you elevate this and continue maybe the mifgash post-Birthright? Sorry,
Okay,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
You see why our fellows were so successful. They never let anybody to say anything.
Gidi, do you want to respond? No?
Yes, I can. Money. That's it. I think that we could increase the number of freshmen going to Israel by 20, 30, 50, 100% if we had enough funds. We could increase the number of the Israelis going on the buses if we had more funds. I think that we have a rare window of opportunity where our brand is so strong and hundreds of thousands of young Jews want to go to Israel. It never happened in the past, and I hope that we don't reject too many in order that it would be looked as if it's impossible to go to Israel. So it shouldn't be a lottery. It should be a really birthright of everybody, and I'm sure that your life on campus is going to be easier if you have at the end of the summer in Penn, let's say, 1,000 instead of 200.
Next question.
My name's Julian Sinclair. I very much enjoyed all the panelists. I had the opportunity to be the campus rabbi at Cambridge University about 10, 15 years ago. And my experience there was that campus is truly a crossroads for Jewish students. But for most of them and most of the time, it's not a crossroads as far as Israel is concerned. Israel is a minor issue in their consciousness most of the time, as vital as Israel is. Some of the issues on which it is truly a crossroads is questions of, such as, well, in an environment where racism is the besetting sin, how can I consider only marrying a Jew? In an environment where sexism is the other besetting sin, how can I affiliate to a religious tradition which has traditional gender roles at its core? In an environment where my very smart professors tell me that anyone who believes in religion is an imbecile, how can I be connected to religion? In an environment where everything is about career and status and salary and what I'm going to be earning when I graduate, how can I affirm values that there's something more important than those questions? And Israel is a contribution to some or perhaps all of those questions, but it's not the answer to all of them.
So I'm sorry, what's your
So the
do you have a
question is, how do the panelists suggest that we can help and support Jewish students for whom campus is a crossroads for those other issues?
Okay. If anybody can You want to answer the question? Oh, okay. So hold on. Let's have somebody answer. Yeah, Mark,
Yeah,
please.
I think those are excellent questions, and they need to be confronted directly. And I mean, the Jewish movement has struggled with this, the role of women in traditional Judaism, and who's called to the Torah and so forth. I think the Jewish studies programs can really help that, and I do think one thing you've touched upon, we do a very poor job. I'm talking most universities around the world, the sort of role of religion, because it is in relation to technology and science, because the orientation, it may even be sub rosa, but it's very definitely in that direction. And I don't think we've done a very good job of explicating that. And I think these are deep, difficult issues, and we need to have Jewish studies programs that help students address them. You're never going to resolve it. I mean, if Maimonides didn't get it all right, we're unlikely to resolve it anytime soon in our time. But that's where, and I agree with you, it is more than just politics. It's not just the foreign policy of Israel. It is, how do you reconcile your sort of modern values with traditional Judaism? A very hard question.
Who has the mic? Yeah.
I only will add a little bit. First of all, you're from England, and I'm a little bit surprised because the questions which you raise, they have nothing to do with the existence of the State of Israel. They existed thousands of years ago and now. The difference is that today in England you have Limud. Thousands and thousands of people are coming to discuss in different groups exactly this question. So if there is really a student on the campus that he's very concerned with these questions, he can find it. Just now I was with a very short trip during the funeral of Margaret Thatcher. Nevertheless, being even 24 hours, I was preoccupied with many and many reformed rabbis who I think didn't exist in England 10 years ago, but they were, of course, about the Kotel and so on, but they're giving different answers to their communities, and their new non-Orthodox communities are flourishing. They are dealing exactly with these questions. Our problem is that Jewish students suddenly connect all these problems with the existence of the State of Israel and are embarrassed by this. And our challenge is to show them that they don't have any reason to be embarrassed. Whatever is their attitude to all these questions, they can be proud, very proud of Israel. That's what I think.
Yeah. Next question.
President Yudof, I was part of a group of UC graduates living here in Israel who asked for a meeting with you because our impression of the student environment for Jewish kids on campus is not quite as positive as I think you just painted. And you declined because of your schedule, which we understand. But in your letter declining the meeting, you gave a lot of very interesting and informative information about the efforts that the regions have made and that you have made to protect Jewish students, to make them feel comfortable. And I've been having trouble squaring that positive environment and those great efforts by the regents with what I read was the recent nomination by 5 regents of a absolute total leader of the BDS campaign, the campaign against Tammy Benjamin, and some outrageous statements as the next student regent on the Board of Regents. How do you square what you said in the letter about the positive atmosphere with the nomination by 5 regents of this awful representative of BDS?
Well, let me start by saying that, I talked to the Jewish students, I talked to the rabbis. We had the ADL National Chair of Education on my campus climate committee. They went out, they visited the campus. It's not dire. I hate to tell you that, but they're more adult than that, and it's vibrant, and they get resentful. I mean, they do get resentful and sometimes even fearful during the Palestinian Awareness Weeks. But by and large, they are thriving. Now, you disagree with
Sir, you can't. No, sir, we can't. We can't actually interrupt when people are speaking.
So I mean, there are 2 questions. I mean, and now in terms of this, I want to say I wasn't on that nominating committee, and I'm upset. That's all I'll really say about that. I I think all I can say is that we work very hard. I mean, you name it. We have a hotline. You know, we've done that. I've visited campuses. I've convened the Hillel rabbis. We issued a statement on boycott. Short of setting aside the First Amendment, which I'm not going to do, and no court's going to allow it, there's not much I can do about it. And one last comment, and then I won't comment further. You know, there's a famous saying in the law that you have a right to free speech, but you don't have a right to be the police commissioner of Boston. And I'll end it there.
By the way, you all very sweetly are looking at me as if I'm calling on anyone. I'm not. There's a woman who's walking around with a microphone, so I have no power at all. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for this interesting panel. I have only one question, though, for everyone.
Can you just speak up a tiny bit?
Yeah, I just only have one question for everyone. In this panel and in many others, we constantly hear about campuses in the diaspora and their challenges towards Judaism and towards Israel. And my question is, how come we don't relate to campuses in Israel? I haven't presented myself, and I should. My name is Nili Glick, and I was an Israel fellow in Madison, Wisconsin for 2 years. And right now I work for Hillel in Israel. I'm the program director at Hillel Tel Aviv. So I know very well the world of campuses outside of Israel, especially in the United States and in Israel.
So, okay, so why don't we talk more about campuses in Israel? Yeah. Anybody want to take that? Yeah? Go ahead.
We have two challenges. One is strengthening Jewish identity in diaspora, and the other is strengthening Jewish identity in Israel. And not everybody in Israel recognizes that we have this problem, but all our shlichim, after they spend 1 or 2 years, or even less, one summer in diaspora, they understand that there are things which are lacking here for strengthening identity. But there is a whole different challenge. There we are doing it by strengthening their connection to Israel. Here we have to do it by making sure that Jews in Israel, not only in the universities, in general, feel that world Jewry and all the history of Jews and all the tradition of Jews is part of their history and of their family too. So that's a very important challenge, but at this moment, at least, it's not on the agenda.
Anybody else? Who has the mic? Ah, good.
Okay, hi. I can say that Sharansky is like a role model for me. I'm from Israel, and I work in Israeli Student Authority as a coordinator of the program. I have for him like 2 questions. First of all, if he sees that it's mandatory to build crops, diplomatic crops, but also that the government or the Jewish agency will be involved in it. And not only in the campuses, I mean in official places, like in the UN, and not only the campuses, because I know that official subject here is about the campus, but I think that the subject is supposed to be also in official places, like in the UN. I was in the UN in Durban 2 and 3 with a delegation there, and I can tell you, I think it's really official. It's very important that the crops will be also there. And the second question, I'm speaking with about my colleagues. I'm from Israeli Student Authority, and 65 workers will be fired 2 months from now, as you can know. And you told us that you really believe in this generation about invest human sources in this generation, and I'm asking you, you really believe in other programs like Taglit and others, but the Israel Student Authority is also like invest a lot of years with this project. So how you just justified about this, you know?
As to the first, the Jewish agency is involved not on the campuses. We are sending hundreds of our shlichim to the federations, even to synagogues, and to many different Jewish institutions, and we are sending thousands to summer camps. But United Nations, it's the government of Israel. We are not going to replace the government of Israel. We cannot do it, and our shlichim can help. But in official diplomatic institutions, of course, the government of Israel has to act. As to your second question, two answers. First of all, Students' Authority now is financed fully by Israeli government and Ministry of Absorption under our agreements.
Okay.
Now, the second. Well, you heard Gidi who was saying money, money, money. We can say the same. And while making our cuts, we are trying not to cut programs. It's the fact that even making all our cuts, we are sending more and more shlichim to the campuses, as you just now heard, and we went from 20 to 69, and with every year we had a lot of cuts. So first of all, we have to see how we can cut our activity in the central apparatus in order not, and at the same time to broaden our programs and not vice versa. But Gidi has a universal answer on everything: money, money, money.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the president of the Chilean Jewish Student Federation.
Chilean Jewish student?
Yeah, Chilean Jewish Student Federation. I founded 2 years ago, aiming to fight anti-Semitism and delegitimation of Israel on campuses. It's not easy. In Chile, we have the largest Palestinian community, and I have to say I disagree with Mr. Sharansky that it has become much more difficult today. This matter in Latin America, especially in Chile and in Venezuela. But I came to realize that there's a much important need that through activism, the youth, we're creating a new identity in universities. We are fighting assimilation, because when you get involved through these years in university, usually there's a gap for Jewish students with the community. We're creating a new identity, fighting for causes that involve everyone and its interest for everyone in the community, like anti-discrimination laws, or whatever Andy mentioned earlier, social work, all kind of things. But it seems to me that it's really hard to find support in these areas, especially
from whom?
From organizations and also to fight for funders that we have to get for ourselves.
So is that your question? How to find support in the larger community?
Especially in Latin America, that for me it seems that it's like the diaspora of the diaspora, because.
Does anybody want to take that?
Well,
no,
I can only comment that Latin America, and Chile especially, is a very tough place. I have to say that Chile today probably is the world capital of Palestinian diaspora. And they definitely, I had meetings with the ministers, and ministers who are very sympathetic to Israel were explaining me how this fact of this diaspora is influencing on their policy, not speaking about the atmosphere, the universities. I have to say that the support has to come also from inner sources. We recently had a special agreement with Eduardo Elstein from Argentina, who is putting a lot of money in Hillel in Argentina, with whom we now have an agreement to send our first fellows to Latin America, and I hope that Chile will be among these places.
Yes, go ahead.
So a couple of comments that I think are related. So it's very striking to me that there's no one from Hillel International, no one who runs a Hillel in the States on this panel. And I think that may relate to the second comment that I have. I run a Jewish Life Center in a small liberal arts campus in the States. And when I saw the title, The Campus is a Crossroad in the Life of a Young Jew, I did not think that the focus would be as extremely on the relationship with Israel as it is. And the stereotype that I receive all the time from the Jewish community is that all I do, or half of what I do even, is deal with Israel and anti-Israel. And the truth is, it isn't half, it isn't a quarter, maybe it's 5%, maybe, of what I do. I mean, what I spend my time doing, much like this gentleman said also, I spend a lot of time creating joyful, meaningful Shabbat services that people can participate in and lead and learn how to empower them in those kinds of contexts. I spend a lot of time on many different things. I spend very little time on this. And so it's not that, I just think that there's something, I mean, it's just a comment about,
well,
I'd like to
one
hear
hopes you have a
reaction.
question for Rachel then, right?
I think Rachel did address this, and I really appreciate that. I think that the panel is constructed to make it seem as if this is what's most of what happens, and it's a small part of what happens.
I think
So-
that was Rachel's point.
Yes, and I think she made it well, but I want to just, okay. And thank you, Rachel, for making that point. Those first two of the three things she said, that's what we do.
I
on
probably
American
should have
do you
mentioned
wanna-
that I was a big part of Hillel on campus. I have to say, though, that I think in campuses like Cornell's, where organized Greek life happens to be a big part of campus, that sometimes that takes over the Hillel organization, because that's a big network. But I agree, a lot of what the Hillel representatives did, they also involved shlichim from Israel, but Hillel was a big part of my time in campus, and I think that's what I still.
We have time for 2 more questions. So glad I don't have to make this decision. Yeah. It's all you. Yes.
Thank you. It's not a question. It's a wishful. I wish Taglit will get Pras Israel. It's really, really something. As an Israeli who, I was born to my father that came to Israel. He was 17 years old. He took bicycles from Bratislava, near this lady.
So
And I said that Taglit should get Pras Israel.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Birthright.
Okay.
I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah, this story
We have
of my...
only time for one more
Yeah.
question. For one more question.
Yeah,
so we have
no,
to,
I just want to tell
Okay.
us a small story about my
I'm
father.
so sorry. We don't
Those
have time for a
days,
story. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah, just one more question. Very quick. Okay?
My question is very simple. As most of the audience are interested in campus issues
Yes.
with regard to Jews, is there a body or a website that assembles all the intelligence and use and best practice and studies and can have a conversation about this topic that we could take forward?
Sir, on behalf of the panel, I love you. Thank you for asking a clear, concise, and actually practical question. Thank you. I have no idea the answer. I hope somebody else does. The answer is no. There are many websites that collect a lot of information, but there's not one website.
Our fellows have a website, have Facebook, have everything. So you can go to their Facebook and you can find everything about their life.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you.